Welcome back to the second hour of Lovebabz, Love Talk on Babz Rawls-Ivy. It's Enroue Thursday.
Oh, I get a thing.
You get a whole thing. Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, doing pretty well.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm
How
glad
are
to
you?
hear it. I'm good. I'm a little tired, but it's all right. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
it's all right to be a little tired when it's a good tired. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, I don't work in a coal mine. So, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Mm. Well, wonderful.
yes,
Well, let's
and I
do a
know
little
summer is coming. Yes, let's get our prayers in.
welcomings on. Bring all the people. So, this is a Yoruba chant to honor our ancestors, letting them know that we honor them for the ashe, for the blessings, for the gifts, for the wonderful aspects of even who we are. We honor them for that ashe that they have left for us, and we're using that ashe, those blessings, those attributes that we have today. So this honors our like male line, our female line, and then all of our ancestors together. That's Baba, Yeye, and Egun or Egungun. Ìbà màmá tó fún wa ṣe o. Ìbà màmá tó fún wa ṣe. Ìbà màmá tó fún wa ṣe o. Ìbà màmá tó fún wa ṣe. Àṣetè fún wa là ń lò yìí o. Ìbà bàbá tó fún wa ṣe. Ìbà yèyé tó fún wa ṣe o. Ìbà yèyé tó fún wa ṣe. Ìbà yèyé tó fún wa ṣe o. Ìbà yèyé tó fún wa ṣe. Àṣetè fún wa là ń lò yìí o. Ìbà yèyé tó fún wa ṣe. Ìbà Egungun tó fún wa ṣe o. Ìbà Egungun tó fún wa ṣe. Ìbà Egungun tó fún wa ṣe o. Ìbà Egungun tó fún wa ṣe. Àṣetè fún wa là ń lò yìí o. Ìbà Egungun tó fún wa ṣe. Ìbà Egungun tó fún wa ṣe. Ìbà Egungun tó fún wa ṣe. Àṣẹ. Amen.
Ashe, amen. Ah, that's good. How are you?
I'm all right. The interesting things that the weather's doing, and pollen, and heat and chill, and all the things. You know, not always so smooth dealing with it, but it's okay. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah. The I don't know. I had a couple of thoughts for this morning, and what I'll do is this: let me know your if you have a preference of a beginning. So
Okay.
one is to just kind of paint a picture of like what the place of the Yoruba kind of religion is, and like how it's navigated from being this indigenous tradition among the Yoruba people through the diaspora, kind of what that journey is and what its different shapes and forms are, just to kind of paint a picture of that. And the other one is actually much more about like related to this chant, but just like the I think the support of people finding like a sense of meaning and purpose, and um, allowing for like the diversity of what that can actually be. So those are
Mm-hmm.
the two things that have kind of come up for me this morning. I don't know if you have a preference of where you'd like to
No, I like that.
start.
I
Well,
like I think
A or B?
I think A.
Okay. Um, so I was talking to my teacher, his name is Ogun Wande Abimbola.
Mm-hmm.
His title is the Awishe Agbaye, which means among the Yoruba traditionalists, among the Yoruba people, the voice of Ifa. So like the voice of this particular Orisha whose sacred literature holds so much of the Yoruba people, so much of the culture, values. It's a it's a massive corpus of primarily oral literature. And I was talking to him about like, because many people ask like, what is this religion called, right? And there are, even among traditionalists, there's some people who use the term Isheshe, which is kind of like, the translation, I believe, which he told me is more like kind of the way things have always been or been done. But that can apply to so many things, right? But many people are using that as a term for a traditional way of looking at this religion. But he also says, well, this is the traditional religion of the Yoruba people, so it should just be called Yoruba, which I like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I start there because, this religion now is really a world religion. It's all over the world in terms of how people practice it. But it's through the particular lens of the Yoruba people, in terms of language, theology, cosmology, kind of place in the culture, food, music, all these things, values. But because of how it's spreading now is different than how it spread, primarily or initially during the horrors of the institutionalization of slavery. And so the Yoruba people were stolen from where they are mostly. So the people are in West Africa, mostly in Nigeria, but also the Yoruba people extend through Benin and Togo and Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
And because of slavery, were stolen and brought to this part of the world. And so where the Yoruba people landed, where that religion got mixed with indigenous practices, wherever they landed, and connecting with indigenous peoples, as well as some aspect of Catholicism, because those were the kind of two institutions or two other religious and spiritual frameworks that were here. And so depending on where they landed, the people kind of found this expression of connection to the divine developed differently. So in Cuba, you have the development of Lukumi and Santeria, whereas Santeria is the African divinities called Orisha were given the names of saints. So for example, Shango, Kabisi, received the name of Santa Barbara. So different Orisha were kind of subsumed under the names of different saints. So Santeria. And some people say this syncretic, and some people say it's not syncretic, but like that's its own tradition, right? It kind of developed its own lineage and its own ritual practices, even though, right, these are all Orisha who are worshiping. Lukumi is still in Cuba, more Africanized, right? So maintained more of the African elements of this religion and practice, though it developed its own line and own lineage, distinct, which branched from how Yoruba religion continued to develop in its homeland. In Brazil, you have Candomblé, and so its own development there, even Umbanda. And so different places in the diaspora, it had this different shape. In Haiti, you have Vodou, which they really created, which incorporates much of Yoruba, but also incorporates many other aspects of different African peoples, different aspects of Catholicism as well. Shango Baptist in Trinidad and Tobago, which is now recognized as an official religion. And so these different places in Central South America, the Caribbean, depending on which Yoruba people, what knowledge they had, then developed in a certain direction. And so I say that because, and then those traditions in their own development survived and still exist today and are thriving as their own aspects of Orisha practice. And in a similar way, you have in so many religions, in Christianity, in Islam, in Judaism, right? Different branches of practice, right? Still all cohesive, but kind of different aspects, either in terms of orthodoxy or in terms of even theoretical and theological frameworks. So even though we're all Orisha practitioners, people who practice candomblé will practice differently than those who practice Lukumi or Santeria or Yoruba. And so there can be both ways that those are honored and respected and ways that there are clashes of like, no, this is the right way, or this is more authentic, or it started there but grew up here, or similar divisions just like any other religion. And I say with this, it's important to me to talk about it in terms of religion because it has the same cohesion as anything else we call religion. And particularly from the viewpoint in this country, things that many times, particularly indigenous practices, are labeled simply as spiritual in a way that's dismissive. Like, well, that's just spiritual. That's just how you feel about it. And you can kind of put it together however you want. And sometimes seen less than as other, what we call world religions, right? Abrahamic religions. And so among the Yoruba, in this Yoruba religion, there are things you do, things you don't, right? I'm a priest in this religion. Just like if somebody was a priest or a mom or a rabbi in another tradition. And I once had a couple come to me who wanted me to do a marriage ceremony for them. And they kept saying things like, well, we were raised Catholic, but we don't want a priest to do this. And I literally kept having to tell them, I say, so I understand, but I'm a priest. Like, there are things I do and don't do. There are frameworks I use. There's, sacred literature I use. This is how you conduct ceremony. I'm not just, how do I feel today? And I'll just kind of do it that way. But for most, for traditions that come out of Black and brown culture, it's easy for people to just say this is just spiritual or shamanistic or, it gets these like very vague terms as if there's not the same kind of rich structure and depth of knowledge and practice that's within them. I think the language is difficult, right? Like religion and culture, and there's less of a division among many indigenous peoples of the place that religion plays, but it's still something that actually has much more form and accountability and structure than I think many people, particularly in this culture where spirituality can be like wherever you want to go shopping, in its kind of worst form, right? It's a very consumer-based, this is what I want it to look like or what I want to kind of go and accumulate. And then I have this spiritual practice that's an amalgamation of just things that I'm comfortable with. And in this practice, part of what drew me to it and the tradition is that there's something I get to lean on and be guided by, right? I get to lean on the wisdom of my ancestors, of a people who said, this is the way we develop a relationship with the divine and the sacred, versus let me just try to figure out based on what I like. Because not everything, we get guidance is not just like, let me just do the things that I like and are comfortable. Our places of learning and healing aren't just about addressing the things that are comfortable. But learning how to drive is not just like, I just get in the car and just do what's comfortable, right? Oh no, there's a stop sign I'm supposed to stop. There's traffic patterns I'm supposed to follow. I'm supposed to go into a rotary this way, not the other way, right? It's not just what's convenient and comfortable. So I just want to kind of start with that as like a a place of understanding, because there's so many people searching for something. And I think so many Black people and so many other people really looking for, so I'll say so many Black people looking for, what are these African traditions that this Africanness that I can be connected to? Because that's what makes us Black people in this country, is being of African heritage. And to explore that and lean into that, not just like, oh, here's what's on my Instagram feed or Facebook. I can just kind of go look at what's a thing to accumulate, or just do, right? This is what this practice looks like. Because it would be like saying to somebody, oh, you want to be a Christian? Go online and go on Instagram and just look up how to be a Christian, right? And it would be very difficult to make your way into what that practice is, depending on how deep you want to go into it. Like if it's just, oh, I just want to explore and hear some things, like it may not matter. But like with Yoruba practice, if you want to learn, like the best things are, you can in the beginning, sure, cast a wide net, right? See what all these practices and traditions have to offer. But you should know, oh, am I connected to someone in Lukumi? Am I being connected to someone who's in Santeria or Candomblé or Umbanda or Yoruba? Like, what is their frame and lineage that they're coming from? Because that's going to inform me, or from the person, about how this practice is understood. And then in this tradition, it's always best, even in the diaspora, to find a person, to find people to talk to, and not just try to gain things online. Because as we know, what all the information online is, right? And that can really just lead to more confusion. And I just want to touch back. So this tradition survived in the diaspora through slavery, mostly by keeping really secret for practices and communities to be hidden, because it was, these are people trying to practice a traditional or some aspect of this, a more Africanized version, instead of just going and being converted to Catholicism or Christianity. And so it was dangerous to demonstrate that. And so you have a development of spiritual houses and spiritual communities that were, for many, many generations, really hidden from the mainstream, intentionally. And so there's still aspects of that, right? Even though times are different, there's still, African indigenous practices are still under assault, really explicitly in the world. And in so many places, it's a little different, in the Caribbean than here, than in the United States, right? African expression in the Caribbean, you have, is different, and what the institution of slavery kind of allowed so much of Africanness to be maintained than it did here. And there are lots of, I think, reasons for that, and but still you have this aspect of an element of secrecy, and in order for someone to learn something, they would very often, particularly in diaspora, like, well, how are you demonstrating that you're committed to learn this thing that we've had to keep secret so that it could survive the institution of enslavement for so many generations? And so much is held, and also you have ways that, like, the bits that are held become so precious that it's difficult to share them widely, because there's a fear of, like, well, they'll just be taken and distorted and thrown into the marketplace, as we see so much it happens anyway.
So do you appreciate, Enroue, when scholars take a look at this Yoruba tradition and try to commit it to paper and pen, into books, into teaching tools? And is that a good thing, or does it give pause?
It's both. I think it's a good thing, because so much of like my lineage is more Yoruba, right? My main teachers are Yoruba people, and so the access to sacred literature is, while my teachers here in the United States is more challenging, right? Because, well, I would have to learn how to be fluent in Yoruba and be embedded there in a certain way to learn a more traditional way. So it's really helpful to have books on things, right? And have scholars and people are writing about this. The challenge becomes, is the perspective of the person writing it. Right? Is this an academic venture? Is it what is the lens that people are even translating these concepts in? So, for example, the Bible was translated into Yoruba, and what they did in that translation is they took some of the Orisha, the divinities of Yoruba, and translated them as like Satan and these negative and evil aspects of in the Bible. Or they took the word for God, right, which is one being, right, and Olodumare, which is there's more complexity in terms of the role of Olodumare. And so in a translation, you're taking concepts with its own integrity as like a worldview and pressing it into another tradition. And so even as that was translated, right, it's translated using indigenous concepts into Christianity. And so then you create kind of good and evil that weren't existing in the Yoruba, like Eshu is not an evil force, but became in that translation synonymous with Satan and the devil. And so then people then grow up, oh, here's the Bible saying, oh, Eshu is Satan and is the devil and that's evil, and Olodumare is good and God. And all of a sudden you're creating a schism and a framework which immediately puts indigenous tradition as evil. Right? Even as just translating, right? So there's an idea of like neutrality when somebody translates something, or I'm just exploring or doing research on this. So it really depends on who's doing the research, what their framework is. And that happens even I think in much more kind of benign ways, where people will say like, well, which chakras are related to which Orisha? And you take a system and another different system and you try to just mash them together. One is there's a way that what keeps happening is African systems are being taken and trying to put into other systems that have more acceptance, right? And so in spiritual communities, connected to yoga, the New Age movement, or Vedic systems in terms of looking at chakra systems, that's its own system with its own integrity. And so to take this desire to, which I think is a good desire of like Black people saying, I want like my people represented in this system. So let me see what these African notions, how they fit into this other system. But by doing so, they actually are diminishing the wholeness and integrity of these African systems by trying to put it into something else, right? Translate it in a way that they don't necessarily have the fullness of understanding and press it into something else. But it's understandable because there's such a lack of real acceptance and respect for African traditions on their own merit. Like, oh, we'll have to, the Orisha are the same as angels, or the Orisha are the same as saints, or the Orisha are the same as these chakras, or the Orisha, we use them in these tarot cards. Like, is to actually, there's integrity, and not just among the Yoruba, but so many African systems have their own integrity. And I think there's a way of, part of what we've internalized as really anti-Blackness in this way of like really still diminishing who we were and the traditions that are still there in Africa. And it's a very narrow framework of what is kind of acceptable of really claiming and valuing African traditions. Growing up, I'm sure you had the same experience. Like, well, what's the beauty and richness of Africa? Well, Egypt, right? All the glory, all the gold, all the pyramids, all the things, right? And so, being connected to the ways that we could find value in our African heritage was by kind of claiming and exploring this richness, right, and wealth that Westerners could honor, right? So the West could honor that, and so they would say, "Oh, sure." Well, some in the West say, "Well, it's not really African. It's like
Yeah.
sub-Saharan." But we're like, "No, no, it's all Africa. You can't take that from us." But most of the continent is below the Sahara, right? And where most of us literally come from, some of that changes now because of different kind of migration. But in terms of enslaved peoples, how we first arrived, mostly sub-Saharan, mostly in this pocket of Western, Central Western Africa.
Yeah. Do you hear that? The
Yeah,
thunder.
thunder rolling like, yes. Shango Kawo Kabisi. So this Orisha connected to thunder and lightning is Shango. And so these different Orisha are connected to many of them are different elements of nature, as well as some have also existed as human beings or been personified.
Mm-hmm.
And they have qualities and aspects. So Shango, right? So I've mentioned Shango since this thunder rolled in, connected to thunder and lightning as a force, right? As a natural force, right? In those kind of storms. And many times the place that lightning strikes, priests and priestesses of a community will go there and gather the stones or the pieces of earth that have been solidified because of that. And those are literally charged with that force, with that energy of this Orisha because of that lightning. And as a person, Shango is the emperor of the Yoruba people and was seen as an artist, right? Loving music and dance, hating liars and thieves, right? Standing for justice, wielding a two-headed axe is this kind of symbol of justice as well. Was also, as an emperor, was a strategist and a warrior in that way. So that when we look at these aspects of this Orisha, as we're seeking support, we go to different Orisha for like their specialty of what that support is. People can go to them for anything, but so it's just like, how do we look at a bolt of lightning cutting through the darkness, right, and illuminating things, right? So this illumination of things that are hidden, victory over our enemies, both internal and external, right? So all these ways in which the characteristics or aspects of these Orisha become a focal point for us, for our prayers. But I also think it's important that we remember, right, these natural aspects of themselves, so we don't get too caught up in the personhood of them, because one, it's easy to try to condense, just like we do with people, right? Oh, this is that type of person, right? But we then actually miss the richness of who they are. So we have a tendency to turn them into archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Shango is this one. You go here for this, you go here for that. And if you instead also are open to so what is this storm? What is my experience of a thunderstorm? How does that inform the support that I might need, the courage I might need, the dramatic display of my wholeness and just who I am, right? Thunder is not trying to be quiet, right? It's not trying to be, a lightning bolt is not a subtle thing, right? And so how do we also bring our problems to that kind of force, or have that understanding of that force inform us to find a solution to the things that we're seeking, the support that we're seeking?
Mm.
So that's also how we then use these different divinities. How do we build relationship with them to support our lives? And different Orisha have these different characteristics. And in our practice, there's all of these Orisha, which actually are infinite. People say there's 400 plus one, and that plus one is kind of the ever expansiveness of it, because, oh, here's this little Orisha that's in this one area of the country, it's this little grove where this stream comes out. It's this sacred place. Somebody in a different country doesn't know about that Orisha, but it still exists. So we understand that expansive quality of the Orisha. But what we try to do is, even with this expansiveness, we may develop a relationship with a particular Orisha, either because of our place where we live, right? Oh, here's West Rock, West River. Here's this, but here's what the ocean is like here. Here's the Quinnipiac. Right? And at times we may then work towards what's called initiation, where the energy of that Orisha through ceremony and through ritual is put into the body of the person, of the devotee. And so there's an intimacy between that person and that Orisha as a worshiper that then moves forward. And that person, through training and learning, may become a priest or priestess of that Orisha.
Mm-hmm.
So initiation doesn't mean you become automatically a priest or priestess, even though there's always the potential for that. And among Yoruba, they don't like to say, no, you're not. They'd be like, of course you are, right? There's just the learning to do, right? You wouldn't want to say no and like cut off the potential for that. So, but it's in the training, right?
Mm-hmm.
Becoming a priest or priestess or an awo or a devotee, not just a devotee, but priest or priestess of that Orisha. Number one is really confirmed from divination in the sacred literature that Orisha is selecting you. And that's the confirmation that this Orisha selects you for that. And then there's training and learning so that you can be in relationship with that Orisha and support other people to be in relationship with that Orisha. Right? Just like any specialty, a mechanic just has more training to understand how to have a better relationship with your vehicle. So it's running well and you can get where you need to go safely. Right? Even though there may be things that you know how to do before that. And so that's that way of moving into relationship with these forces. You don't have to be initiated to have these relationships, right? You can go down to the river and say prayers and make offerings. You go to the ocean, do the same. Go to our ancestors, you do the same. But as one becomes, maybe a calling to be in a deeper, more intimate relationship, right? Getting married to someone hopefully is different and more intimate relationship than simply dating, right? Or living together, right? These stages of intimacy, right? You can track that. And so because this is a system, right? There's structure to do that, right? Many people could have just the same kind of intimacy without the institution of marriage, but this country says, well, there's this institution of marriage, and people can certainly argue this, right? that is about this intimacy, right? Yes, it's this legal piece with all the things, but there's a quality of it that is a societal acknowledgement of a particular way you want to be in relationship with each other. And so things like initiation are also that. Mm-hmm. Right? As well as literally the ceremony to do that, right? That enables that to happen.
Well, thank you for. I do believe periodically that we have to come back to the roots of things, because there are people that follow along, and they always, and they love following along. So I think it's always nice to remind them of the historical nature of this and how people build upon it. So thank you for that. That was, it was great going back through that again.
Time just flew, didn't I? Look at that.
It does. Listen, I tell people all the time, this goes quick.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
So thank you so much.
Thank you,
Mr. Halfkenny. It was a pleasure to see you as always.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
And send more dates so before your summer gets busy.
Well, I believe
you did. Did we book some already?
I believe I'll be here next week.
All right. I think you might be right.
But then we'll look at more dates after that.
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you, Enroue.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Harry.
See you on the 30th.
Yeah,
Say hi to everybody at your house.
I will. You take care.
All right, my dear. Thanks, Harry. Have a good week. Have a good Thursday night. I'll see you tomorrow.